Okay, so Foundations of Math 10. This is section 5.4. It's the basically in your textbook there. If you look that up, it's a math lab. We're graphing data. So if you're watching this video and you weren't in class or you need to make up 5.4 for some reason, this is the activity that we did in class. So it looks like this. We're going to get here eventually in groups of 2 or 3. If you're by yourself, you can do it by yourself at home. But groups of 2 or 3. And what we need is you need textbooks and notebooks or binders totaling a total of 5. So if you have groups of 2 or 3, you should have a textbook and a binder. You should be fine. If you need to borrow a book from the back shelf when we start, that's great. Or if you need to get a book from home or whatever, if you're at home doing this, just please put my books back exactly where you found them, please. Remember the shelf you put them on. I don't want them all mixed up. So if you grab something from back there, that's totally fine. Just put it back as close to the same spot as possible. You're also going to need a ruler or a tape measure for this. So what we're going to do is we're just going to graph a very simple graph, and it's going to be height versus the number of books or binders or whatever that are stacked on your desk. So that's a clue for the title of the graph that you're going to need to create. Okay? So we're going to take some books and we're going to measure the height. The first point, okay, is going to be to measure the height of one of your books or binders. So you take one textbook, or you take your one little skinny notebook, or your one binder, whatever. They're all going to be a little bit different heights, okay? And you're going to measure one of them, the height from the top of the desk of that. So your first point is going to be 1, comma, the height of your book, okay? And we will do the scale will be centimeters, okay? But we'll cover that in a bit. For the second point, now you stack another book on top of the first one and you remeasure, okay? Pretty simple, right? So again, it does not have to be all textbooks. It'd actually be better if the books were slightly different, but not necessary. If you have three textbooks, that's fine. Continue this process until you've measured the stack of all 5 books, okay? So you're going to come up with some points, and again, there's going to be number of books and height. So if it's 1 and 4 centimeters, let's say, or 2 and 6 centimeters, 3, 7.3 centimeters, right? Be as exact as you can to 1 decimal place for the heights. All right. So I need you to fill this out now, okay? I need you to write this down. We're going to talk about what a properly labeled graph looks like, okay? So this is important, and we just want to make sure we go over this. The graph is going to look something like this, right? You're going to have 2 axes, and for this case, we just need kind of like an L-shaped graph here. Okay, don't be measuring anything yet. You guys should be copying this down. Get your books over. Okay, write this down. Let's go. Horizontal axis. That's this one. That's the x-axis. So what's going to go on the horizontal axis? The height or the number of books? Which one? Oh, please tell me you know this one. Height. Someone said height. Okay, do you agree with height? The horizontal axis is the independent variable. It's the one that you start with. On the vertical axis, that's the responding variable or the dependent variable. That's the one that you actually measure. So what's on the horizontal axis? And it's not height. Thank you. It's the number of books. Okay, very important. You start with 1 book on the desk, and then you measure its height, okay? So what you start with is the independent variable, the number of books. The vertical axis is the responding variable, and that's the height. Okay? So you are copying this down right now in your notes, okay? Just so we're all on the same page here, we all understand. All right. So that's first, okay? So on your graph, it's going to look like this. Please make sure your graph is at least half a page, okay? Let's spread this out. Let's make it exact, make it good. Okay, the title. What's a good title? Now, titles do not have to include both variables in the title. They don't. Lots of times they do. You know, you could do height versus number of textbooks stacked on a desk. That would be fine. Okay? You could put height versus number of books. You could just write a title as height of stacked books. Any of those would be fine. Okay? Because you've got the height on the vertical axis and you've got the number of books here. So you could just do it. I like doing the variable on the left here, and then versus the variable on the right. So height versus number of stacked books, let's say. That would be a good title, but you could have something else. But that's that would be totally acceptable. Okay, so the scale. Now you remember what the scale is. The scale is kind of where we start, the number for the unit of this variable, and then where we would kind of want to end here. So are we going to go, for these number of textbooks, are we going to go from 0 to 20 here? Would that be an appropriate scale for our graph? If we're talking about the x horizontal axis, number of books. Would I go from 0 to 20, yes or no? No, why not? Because I'm only using 5. So this is just a heads up. You do not want to do this, 0 to 20, and then have all your points like here. Okay, that is not a good scale. Your points, instead, should be spread out across the whole graph. So that means you have to adjust your scale appropriately. So 0 to 20 would not be a good scale there. Maybe 0 to 5. Or, if you want to leave some room to predict something, all right, you might want to go just beyond that, maybe 6 or 7, and then that leaves room for you to predict, you know, something that would extend beyond the actual data that you collected, okay? But for now, 0 to 5 is fine. If you go 0 to 6 or 7, that would be great too, okay? So let's say 0 to 7, just in case we want to predict something, you know, outside of our data. Vertical. Okay, we talked about, well, we talked about the units a little bit. We'll get to that in a second. But what would be the scale for the vertical? Now, at this point, you don't know, really, because you haven't done your measurements yet, right? So once you do your measurements, then you kind of work on your scale. So this is going to be, we'll leave that until later, until you actually have your data points in front of you. Then you look at the height of, obviously you could start at 0, right? So we could go from 0. Any guesses what an average of 5 books might be stacked on the desk? Any just guesses, like without measuring? How high do you think 5 books, binders, notebooks would be stacked on the desk? What are some guesses? 15? 15 centimeters? Right? What else? You think more or less than that? Anybody? How many centimeters is in one ruler? Well, you could look on the ruler, and the highest number that you see. Well, that one is small. Listen, if you've got a small ruler, you got a 10 or 15 centimeter ruler, then you just have to measure up to a certain point, put your pencil there or finger there, and then add on to it. This is what you got to do. Okay? Now, could it be more than 15? If you look at the binder, that binder is almost 15 centimeters tall. Okay? So we're going to leave this one for now. Okay? So we might have to go from 0 to, let's say, you know, maybe 15, or maybe it's got to be 30, or maybe it's got to be 40. I don't know. You guys figure that out. Okay, so units. Horizontal. Do we have units for number of books? Is there a unit for that? Like kilometers? I don't know. Or seconds? No. No, there's no units. It's just number of books. So really, it's just it's just a number. So you wouldn't actually really put anything, because in the units you'd put something in brackets. So there's nothing for units horizontal. What about the vertical? We said we're probably going to use what? Centimeters. So put centimeters in brackets over here on the side of your graph like this. Okay? So you would write height here, and centimeters would be the units, would be in brackets always. Title up here. Okay? This is the variable quantity and then the units. All right. So, I'm going to get you started in just a minute here. Once you're done this, I want you to answer these 2 questions about your graph. So you're going to have a graph that's about half a page, okay? Use your ruler to make your lines nice and straight. I'm going to give you about 20 minutes to do this, all right? So you've got time, make it good. And on the same page, I want you to answer these questions, and you'll be turning this in with your homework. So this will be part of the 5.4 homework. Okay, so once you completed this graph, you want to do these 2 questions and then come show me your work. I'll give you the rest of the assignment. So here's the homework from the textbook, page 286, number 1 and 2. Once you're done, the answers to these questions. So again, your hint for question number 1 is, do the points in between the ones that you plotted, does this point make sense? So 1.25 textbooks, does that make sense? Or 1.75, does that make sense? Would this be a continuous pattern here? Or does that even, 1.2 textbooks, would that be something we would measure? So that's just your hints, and then here's your questions from the text.